Hi, welcome to another recorded Hear Center virtual presentation. Hear Center does free webinars on topics related to speech, language, and hearing every month. So if you would like to receive word about when our next webinars will be, please send us an email at info@hearcenter.org so we can add you to our monthly and weekly mailing lists. So if you're joining us today, I can guess that you're already a little familiar with tinnitus. Maybe it's a constant issue in your life. Well, today we're going to answer some of the more commonly asked questions regarding this condition. So, tinnitus, or ringing in the ears, are those whooshing, hissing, ringing, and pulsing sounds that seemingly come out of nowhere. People have also described their tinnitus sounds as vacuum cleaners, heavy traffic, and even bees. And whether you know it as tinnitus or tinnitus, from the Latin origin meaning to ring or tinkle, well, this condition can be annoying and disruptive. Tinnitus is very common. About 50 to 60 million Americans experience some form of this condition. To put that number into perspective, the entire population of California in 2019 was about 40 million people. So that's the entire state of California, plus a few more million who know firsthand what tinnitus is like. And in this presentation, we hope to give you some peace in mind, or maybe some new insights into how you can manage this condition in your own life. In part 1, we'll answer questions like, what is tinnitus? Why do I have it? And does it mean I have hearing loss? And in part 2, we'll look at if there is a cure for tinnitus, and some things you can do if you have tinnitus in your own life. So jumping right into, what is tinnitus? Tinnitus is a very common condition that is actually a symptom and not a disease itself. So if you have tinnitus, it usually does not indicate that you have a serious health disease or problem. For most people, it's just something annoying that they have to deal with. But in about 10% of cases, tinnitus can be so disruptive and severe that professional help is required to help manage it. In general, there are two types of tinnitus, and again, tinnitus is basically when you hear sound when no sound is present. There's no outside source that it's coming from. You don't hear a radio on or see any bugs flying around nearby. It sounds like it's coming from somewhere inside your head. And this is the most common form of tinnitus, which is known as subjective tinnitus and makes about 90% of all tinnitus cases. A second type, which is much more rare, is called objective tinnitus. And basically, this means you and someone else can both hear some sounds coming from inside you. That sounds a bit hard to believe, but if we think about a doctor examining a patient, for example, if you have a heart murmur, you might hear a whooshing sound with every heartbeat. If a doctor was listening to your heart with a stethoscope, they would hear it too. But back to subjective tinnitus. We already talked about some of the more common symptoms earlier, such as the ringing, the whooshing. But here are some ways people have described the tinnitus symptoms: static, buzzing, ocean waves, even dial tones. People have very different experiences when it comes to tinnitus. For some, it's only in one ear. Sometimes it's in both. Sometimes tinnitus happens every now and then, and for others, it's a daily nuisance. Some other ways you might want to describe tinnitus to your doctor or hearing doctor: tonal, pulsing, or on the rare side of the spectrum, musical, where you hear music or singing. So you might be wondering, okay, how is my brain doing this in the first place? How am I hearing sounds that aren't there? To illustrate a possible example of what could be happening when tinnitus symptoms appear is if we look at a temporary noise-induced hearing loss. So I think we've all been to a loud concert or show and had that ringing in our ears afterwards. I'm mentioning this example and this scenario because tinnitus is usually connected with some aspect of hearing damage, but we will learn that this is not always the case. Tinnitus is a very mysterious condition. Okay, so back to the example of being at a concert. When sound enters our ears, there are tiny sensitive cells that tell our brain, hey, what you're hearing right now is sound. In this song, I'm picking up high pitches and low pitches. I can hear everything. At a concert, really loud sounds can temporarily damage how these cells work. As a result, the cells stop sending certain sound data to our brains. Scientists hypothesize that our brains recognize that something's wrong. And they say, or the brain is saying, something's up. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be hearing something from those cells, but I'm not getting anything. I think I'm just going to make some sounds that I think I'm supposed to be hearing. And this is when we hear that ringing after the loud concert. Our brains recognize that there are pitches and sounds missing as a result of damage, so it compensates by creating its own sounds to fill in those gaps. Now, to be clear, this is a pretty isolated and specific example of how tinnitus might come on. And this will not always be the case with every person after a concert or in general. Okay, so you're thinking, why do I really have tinnitus? I don't think it was caused by one loud concert I went to before the pandemic. And to that I will say, constant exposure to really loud sounds over time can create a reoccurring tinnitus, but that's beside the point. Just to reiterate, tinnitus is not a disease. It is usually, but not always, a symptom of an underlying health issue or condition. So, to go over some causes, potential causes, tinnitus is commonly associated with damage to the ear or auditory system, which is the system responsible for hearing. Scientists and researchers have also linked over 200 health disorders that create tinnitus as a symptom. Everything from sinus infections and hormone changes to thyroid abnormalities. That's a lot of ground to cover for a condition like this. On the flip side, you can also be someone who's healthy with little to no health issues or issues with your hearing, and you can still have tinnitus, seemingly without an obvious reason. And this is one of the most frustrating things for people to understand when they suffer from this condition. Tinnitus is elusive. Researchers and scientists to this day cannot figure out the exact cause, which makes sense if you remember that there are so many conditions that create tinnitus as a symptom. But if you haven't looked too much into your own medical history yet, the American Tinnitus Association describes some commonly reported catalysts for tinnitus. It could help you in your tinnitus management journey to know about these conditions and catalysts. And just a little note, if you do have tinnitus, it doesn't automatically mean that you have any of the following health conditions. If you think there might be a connection, please speak with your doctor first before making any hasty decisions. Blockages in the ear can cause pressure to build up in our inner ear and irritate our ear organs, such as earwax, loose hair, and foreign objects. Nerve, blood flow, and muscle issues caused by head and neck trauma can also bring about tinnitus symptoms, as well as issues with our temporomandibular joint, or TMJ. This is the joint that connects our lower jaw to our skull and is located in front of our ears. The TMJ shares some ligaments and connections with the auditory system. So if you might have issues with your TMJ, it is possible that it could also create issues with your auditory system. Sinus infections and congestions can increase the pressures in your ear, leading to that common ringing sound. And traumatic brain injury can directly cause damage to the hearing-related parts of the brain. Lastly, certain medications can damage the ear, resulting in hearing loss or ringing. These are known as ototoxic drugs, and currently there are over 200 medications such as certain NSAIDs, antibiotics, and cancer medications that can cause symptoms. You should speak with your doctor if you're unsure if your medication is ototoxic. Additionally, examine your own medical history to see if any of these factors appear in your life. We know tinnitus is an elusive condition, but we hope that these possible causes can steer you in a direction that you might not have thought before. But let's say you haven't experienced any of those common catalysts for tinnitus and you're pretty healthy. Does tinnitus mean you have a hearing loss? Well, it could be a possibility. In some cases, ringing in the ears could be an early sign of hearing loss. Although tinnitus is often associated with damage to your hearing, it does not cause a loss. Nor does a hearing loss cause tinnitus. They are related, but one does not automatically mean that the other will occur. There goes tinnitus again, being elusive and difficult to pin down. Still, if you haven't yet, seeing an audiologist is a good next step after seeing your doctor. If it turns out you do have hearing loss with tinnitus symptoms, your treatment plan could address the loss while also making tinnitus more manageable. At your evaluation, be prepared to describe the types of sound you hear when you have tinnitus. When do you hear it, and how often? All this information can be helpful in creating a management plan for you. And since we're on the topic of hearing and hearing loss, one easy way to prevent damage to your ear, and thereby possibly prevent tinnitus symptoms, is to do regular headphone volume checks. I know these days we're having many Zoom meetings and enjoying a lot of content at home with our devices, but one quick way to check if you're listening to music or the TV too loud with headphones is to hold your over-the-ear headphones about 3 feet away from you. At that distance, if you can hear the music coming out of them, then they're too loud. Similarly, if you wear AirPods or wireless earbuds, and the sound is just so loud that you can't hear anything around you, you can't hear people talking or hear any doors opening, that also means your volume level is too high. And to me, that sounds a bit dangerous if you can't really hear your surroundings. So please do regular volume checks, because loud sounds over long periods of time can cause hearing damage.